they've been waiting more than 3 months for. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Suez Canal, Egypt.
Well, let's talk to Craig Fuller, the chief executive of the shipping data provider FreightWaves. Craig, good to see you. So she's sailing away at last. Why has it taken so long? I'm guessing the lawyers and the insurers have had an absolute field day.
Yeah, it's a lot of money on the line, and you have a lot of parties that are impacted. So the ship lines are able to share the burden to the BCOs, the folks that are shipping stuff. So there's been a lot of negotiations, insurance companies, the ship line, the government, and the canal operator are all involved in this, and there's a lot of attention. So no one really wanted to give ground and give in, but those negotiations are confidential, and we will probably at some point get more details.
What are the lessons that we can learn from this saga?
Well, I think everyone is now aware how fragile global supply chains are and how dependent we are on the movement of cargo efficiently. And these disruptions can cause significant downline issues to supply chains. And so because of the attention that's being paid to it, companies are now looking at building redundancy, having more inventory available to them, and looking at alternative suppliers for sources of goods. It's a fragile economy when you have things like this that disrupt it, particularly when there's as much demand as there is right now in the global economy.
And in Europe, there were lots of stories circulating suggesting that Christmas toys would be disrupted and all the rest of it. I wonder, has the supply chain disrupted by this incident now recovered?
I don't think that Christmas itself will be disrupted by this one incident. I think broadly supply chains are being taxed just by so much demand, and every little disruption pushes back further the ability to recover from a post-COVID world. So I think it's not so much that the Suez Canal and this particular ship will disrupt Christmas. It's all of the other dependencies and all of the other cargo movement that's already being stretched.
And do you see evidence of shipping companies and their customers changing or rethinking their reliance on the Suez Canal route after this incident?
No, I think most people have chalked this up to a single isolated incident of just an unfortunate incident. So I don't think it changes how companies are thinking about it. I think what's happened, though, with COVID and the quarantine and the disruption of supply chains broadly is that people are taking every bit of data into consideration and thinking about building redundancy to absorb any issue that may take place. But I don't think it's just related to the canal. I think it's much broader than that.
Craig Fuller from FreightWaves in the United States. Thank you very much.
2 men have been arrested after the shooting of a prominent investigative journalist in Amsterdam. Peter de Vries is in serious condition in hospital after being shot in the head following a TV appearance. He's well known in the country for exposing criminal gang leaders.
Stefan Löfven has been reinstated as Sweden's Prime Minister with the narrow backing of Parliament. This ends weeks of turmoil after he resigned last month, having lost a no-confidence vote. But the former union boss says he'll resign again if his spending plans are not approved by members of Parliament.
Vietnam has gone ahead with high school exams in the capital Hanoi, despite a surge in coronavirus infections. Students from different schools will mix as they take the exams, which determine whether they can go on to university. Ho Chi Minh City is the centre of the current outbreak, with the country recording 1,000 new cases a day.
Emergency workers in Japan continue to search for survivors after heavy rain caused a deadly mudslide in the resort of Atami. 7 people have been confirmed dead and dozens of people are still missing. Phoebe Amoroso reports.
It was another long day for rescue workers in Atami. The search through the mud began at 6 a.m, but the 72 hours, considered crucial for finding survivors, came and went. Local officials are at a loss.
An old classmate of mine and his wife and child, the family of 3, are still missing. Words can't express my feelings. At the moment, there's no choice but to try to go forward one step at a time.
The risk of further landslides is hampering rescue efforts. The highway remains closed, and the bullet train was temporarily halted Tuesday morning on fears sediment had flowed onto the tracks.
Behind me is Izusan, where the mudslide tore through, causing widespread destruction. Questions are now being asked as to how a disaster of this scale occurred.
54,000 cubic meters of soil was deposited upstream for construction work. This collapsed, merged with other sediment, and formed a deadly river of mud. But some people are also questioning why an evacuation order was not issued, given the heavy rainfall. The priority for many, however, is how to help survivors. More than 550 people were evacuated.
They can't go back. I don't think they can simply rebuild their homes in the same place.
I think it's really fantastic that New Fujia Hotel is being used as an evacuation site. It's amazing opening a place like that up.
New Fujia Hotel is one of 2 hotels that are sheltering those who lost their homes. Both had been closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now they provide a safer environment for evacuees than group shelters where infections can easily spread. The lobby at New Fujia has become a donation centre where people are bringing clothes and other supplies. A volunteer centre opened on Monday and received 900 applications in under 24 hours. The group aims to begin restoration work in areas that have minor damage, while Japan's self-defense forces work to clear buildings that have collapsed. Atami is a popular tourist destination known for its hot springs. Locals are hoping their city will recover quickly and once again become a place to relax. Phoebe Amoroso, CGTN, Atami.
Working a 4-day week in Iceland has been deemed an overwhelming success. Trialled over 4 years, employees were paid the same rate but worked fewer hours. The working week was cut from 40 hours to 35. Researchers say productivity remained the same or improved in the majority of workplaces. Workers have reported feeling less stressed and that their health and work-life balance were better. So positive are the results that around 170,000 union members from Iceland's working population of just under 200,000, or 87%, are now working shorter hours. And Iceland's not the only country to test the concept. In May, the Spanish government agreed to a 32-hour work week over 3 years without cutting pay, investing around $60 million towards the costs of the trial project. And New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has suggested employers consider a shorter working week as a way of helping the economy bounce back from the pandemic. Well, Joe Ryle from the think tank Autonomy is campaigning for a 4-day week here in the UK. So, fewer hours for the same pay. I asked him, what's the catch?
There is no catch. I mean, we already knew that, 4-day working week, no reduction in pay is good for workers' mental health in terms of better well-being, creating a better work-life balance so we have enough time to enjoy our lives. What this study shows is also very good for productivity. So it's a win-win policy for both workers and business.
Well, you say it's a win-win for business. Obviously, employees will be happy, but genuinely, plenty of employers won't be happy at this idea.
They should be, because 9 times out of 10, productivity goes up. It at least stays the same, and it seems to even go up. So actually, in terms of output, in terms of companies getting a better output from their employees, the 4-day working week really improves productivity.
So how do you think this can be rolled out and potentially brought in successfully elsewhere?
So, of course, this can't happen overnight. We're talking about, a big shift in the economy, the entire economy moving to a 4-day week. But we think it could be done in something like a parliament where you have a transition to get there, and the government can help companies along the way. There was a study out in the UK about 6 months ago which showed the majority of firms could get on with it and remain profitable. And we're starting to see more and more examples of this now. So trials in Iceland, in Spain, in Scotland, in Ireland, and even some bigger companies getting on and trialing it. Unilever in New Zealand, Microsoft in Japan too. It's really an idea as time has come. If you look at the pandemic, it's changed the world of work completely already anyway. So this is a great opportunity to actually introduce a 4-day week so we can all enjoy our lives a bit more.
And this particular pilot study was conducted in the public sector, but do you think it will translate to the private sector with its different demands?
Entirely. I mean, there's a case to be made for the public sector to be a pioneer for the 4-day week. But more and more, we're starting to see businesses adopting and trialing it themselves. There's nothing to stop businesses from just doing it now. And what we're saying is, if you have concerns, we accept it's a big shift in the way that we work. If you've got concerns about it, why not just trial it for 6 months and see how it goes? Because it seems to be the case that whenever it's implemented, worker well-being goes up, productivity goes up. Let's remember, this is good for the environment too, in terms of bringing down carbon emissions and reducing household energy consumption.
In some workplace cultures, though, being seen to put in more hours and do more is a measure of success. Do you think it will take some time to move away from that?
I think it will, but we have to really question that. Why is it a badge of honour to be seen to be working all the time? Why is it a badge of honour to be stressed, overworked, burnt out? These aren't positive things, and the 4-day week is about reclaiming time in our lives so we have enough time for things like family, friends, hobbies. We're not saying this is about not stop working at all. This is about sharing work more equally across the economy, which will bring down unemployment too and allow us enough time to just enjoy life.
So given all the benefits you've outlined, when do you think we can all see ourselves doing this 4-day week? When will that date be, do you think?
I hope within the next 5 years. We're trying as much as possible to get governments across the world to trial it, encouraging businesses to adopt it and trial it. And increasingly we are seeing that. It's an idea that's taking off from Japan to Iceland to Scotland to Spain. It's going to take a little bit of time to get there, but we'd encourage as many governments across the world to rethink how we work. For a long time, it has not worked for the majority of people.
Now, a date with destiny for Denmark and England, who face each other in the semi-final of Euro 2020 at Wembley Stadium in London in just over 2 hours' time. 60,000 fans will be there to watch, most of them England supporters. The winners face Italy in the final on Sunday, after they beat Spain in the first semi-final. Well, our Guy Henderson is at Wembley for us. So, Guy, a fantastic atmosphere in the stadium for the first semi-final, but likely to be even louder this evening, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've been covering the build-up to every single one of England's Wembley fixtures during this tournament, and not much compares to the atmosphere here, as you say, just a little while before kick-off now. It's the semi-final, so of course there's going to be more intensity, more suspense. Wembley's been allowed to let more fans in for both of these semi-finals and the final, which are both taking place, those 3 fixtures at Wembley over the course of a few days. So that is also going to build things up as well, build up those levels of excitement. Every single one, almost, of the fans that you see here pouring into this stadium behind me are English fans, because coronavirus travel restrictions means that would-be travelling Danish fans aren't allowed to make their way here, and so that means there is desperation, can you call it, from almost everyone here for their side to finally break that cycle, because here's a fact that might surprise a lot of people, maybe not in England but around the world. England have never made it to a European Championship football final.
So let's talk about the football then. It was a good match last night. What do you think we can expect from this game? Both teams seem quite confident going into it.
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's as with this one, there is as with last night's game, there is perhaps a mismatch on paper. But what happened in the Italy-Spain game, I think, surprised a lot of people, in that Spain came in the underdogs, and yet throughout large parts of the game they were actually able to dictate what was a pretty furious pace. And perhaps if they managed to put away more of the chances that were presented to them, perhaps the result would have been different. Denmark are definitely the underdogs coming into this game. England are the 4th-ranked side by FIFA in the world. Their squad is at full strength. There was some question over the fitness of Arsenal's Bukayo Saka, but he, we understand, may even be in the starting 11 for this fixture. Denmark, of course, missing their star player. That has been very well covered. He collapsed during the very early stages of this competition on the pitch in the middle of the match. But the aftermath of that tragic event seems to have done something to this Danish side. They are galvanised. There's this strong team spirit that has contributed to them getting this far. The big question now is, can that momentum still carry them further, or will the sheer talent on display amongst the England side, with this very lively crowd behind them, finally bring that fairy tale to an end? We'll have to wait and see.
And Guy, just briefly, as you say, England haven't made it past this stage before. This would be a big deal for the team and their fans.
There is, throughout the country this evening, as I'm sure you'll be able to attest to there as well in the studio, a great deal of excitement about this fixture. Of course, England made it to the semi-finals of the World Cup too. This is now their second major tournament semi-final in a row. There is a great deal of excitement and expectation about the ability within this young attacking side. This, they hope, will be the moment that they can finally break that taboo.
Henderson in Wembley, many thanks.
A ban on spectators at the Tokyo Olympics is now unavoidable. That's according to a Japanese government source. A decision on keeping stadiums empty will be made on Thursday, just 16 days before the Games begin. The authorities are also expected to put Tokyo into a new COVID state of emergency. Foreign spectators are already excluded. Reuters news agency says political setbacks for the government in Sunday's Tokyo Assembly election have forced it to change its position.
With only a few weeks to the Tokyo Olympics, Germany's athletes are training hard ahead of their departure for Japan.
The Games have been postponed, of course, for a year due to the pandemic, yet some on Germany's Olympic gymnastics team will be contending with more than COVID at this year's event. Natalie Carney reports from Munich.
Spectators peppered the mostly empty seats of Munich's Olympic Halle, home to the 1972 Olympic Games, so a fitting place to watch Germany's best gymnasts as they prepare for the 2020 Games in Tokyo. With their perfect posture and flawless makeup, these gymnasts may look the part, but they know this year's Games will be like none before them. 21-year-old Sarah Voss has mixed feelings about her Olympic debut.
I'm not concerned because I know there's a very high hygiene concept, so everyone is going to be safe, I guess. We are going to be tested all day. We're going to be in our bubble. We're not going to see as much as we usually see.
Protective COVID measures will restrict the number of spectators at each event, as well as the mixing of athletes, says two-time Olympic veteran Elizabeth Zeitz.
Normally it's the biggest sports thing you can imagine. All the people come together to celebrate sports, and this time I think it's more about to make your dream come true, to show what you can do, but not to celebrate too much together.
But COVID-19 is not the only hurdle some will be contending with.
These athletes train their entire lives for a chance at the Olympics. And while the judges are focused on their strength, their form, and agility, some of the female competitors have the added concern of their wardrobe.
Tradition is partly to blame, but according to some athletes, the fans have at times crossed a line too.
We have the year 2021. Social media is what some people's life is all about. They can post whatever they want, and also they can post things of me, and sometimes I'm not feeling comfortable with that. So that's why we sometimes wear unitards.
The unitard is a spandex leotard with full arms and legs. Once worn for religious reasons, now more and more female gymnasts are wearing them to protest against the sexualization of their bodies. Two-time Olympian gymnast Kim Boy, also on the Tokyo ticket for Germany, says female gymnasts should not be forced to wear the traditional bathing suit style leotard.
We just want to show the world and all the women outside that you can wear whatever you want if you feel comfortable with it. I wear the one without legs, so I also feel comfortable with it. But the one without legs, you have to glue on your butt, so that's just right.
That could be serious because a slip of the uniform could cost the athlete their medal.
Especially when a girl is on floor and she tumbles, etc. Her leotard is likely to slip away, and that's where some people in the ranks started like whistle. And if you grab it and pull it, and if something is not right there, like also your hair or makeup, or you see your bra straps, it's likely to have a deduction.
The unitard is also expected to make younger gymnasts more comfortable with their changing bodies and keep them in the sport longer. Just like their male counterparts, these professional athletes want to be respected for their performance and hope that the unitard will be adopted by other gymnasts at Tokyo 2020. Natalie Carney, CGTN in Munich.
And finally, if you don't like heights, look away now. 4 German tightrope walkers have set a new world record, travelling 2.1 kilometres along a high wire 600 metres above a Swedish valley.
It was a team effort, as rigging the wires took 48 hours and involved flying a rope down one side of the mountain by drone. The walkers reported that it was windy, but all made it across.
The headlines again. Haiti is under a state of emergency after the assassination of the president. Juvenal Moïse was shot dead at his home. A short time ago, the Haitian ambassador to the United States gave further details.
It seems that this horrible act was carried out by well-trained professional killers, commandos. They were speaking Spanish. We believe those are mercenaries. It's very important for this international manhunt because those killers are on the loose.
The European Parliament has heard calls for funding to be cut to Hungary in a dispute over a law banning schools from using materials seen as promoting homosexuality.
And the British fintech giant Wise has seen its valuation hit $11 billion after making its debut on the London Stock Exchange.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching. More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Deadline looms for South African police to arrest former President Jacob Zuma after his sentencing to jail for contempt of court. Ever Given container ship that blocked the Suez Canal finally allowed to leave the waterway after a compensation deal was reached. And African leaders attending the CPC World Political Parties Summit thanked China for helping the continent during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahir Mutua, live in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins me now with your business headlines.
That's right, Mahir. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Nigerian legislators approve a near $2.5 billion supplementary budget to pay for vaccines and further defense services. And Zimbabwe's central bank introduces into circulation its new highest denomination banknote. We'll have the details and the data on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's catch up with the latest in current affairs with Mahir.
Rama, thank you. We begin in South Africa, where former President Jacob Zuma has urged the courts to block his arrest bound for Wednesday midnight. Zuma's lawyer, Dali Mpofu, told the Pietermaritzburg court that the call was justified given Zuma's precarious condition. This follows the Constitutional Court's earlier decision to sentence Zuma to 15 months in jail for failure to appear before a court. It's still not clear if the police will honor the Wednesday deadline request. The ANC has, however, distanced itself from Zuma's actions of contempt of court. Now, the Communist Party of China and World Political Parties Summit was held on Tuesday, in which China's President Xi Jinping delivered the keynote speech from Beijing. The summit was attended by more than 500 leaders of political parties and organizations from over 160 countries and over 10,000 political party representatives.
We are very proud as the African National Congress to have a strategic relationship with the Communist Party of China. We celebrate with the CPC for their centenary celebration. We are the African National Congress. We are 109 years old. We're older than the CPC, but we learn so much from the CPC, and we are filled with great admiration and praise for the manner in which the Communist Party of China has led developments in China, dealing with the issue of poverty, dealing with the issue of development. China today stands tall among the countries of the world in the way that it has led development, which has improved the lives of ordinary people and moving ahead to eradicate poverty. Now, we are also in great admiration with the way China, led by the CPC, has been able to be a very progressive player in international affairs. China is proving to be a dependable friend and a friend that progressive nations can rely on for their own development. But also the standing of China on world issues and affairs is the type that we appreciate, and that is where we work very closely with China. In the BRICS family, we work extremely close with China, and I also work very closely with President Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC. And we are also in deep admiration of General Secretary Xi Jinping's thought of promoting socialism with Chinese characteristics. Many of the elements of his thoughts are also part of our own orientation in terms of the way we are seeking to develop our own country, in the way that we are seeking to ensure that the people of our country benefit from the developments that we are introducing as a nation. So we are very closely allied with China and the CPC, and we are very proud of that relationship.
Our party draws lessons and inspiration from the successes achieved by the Communist Party of China. We applaud how the Communist Party of China has turned around the fortunes of China to be a global leader in a vast number of socioeconomic spheres. We are confident that under the leadership of the Communist Party of China and Your Excellency President Xi Jinping, China will achieve its mission of realizing happiness and prosperity for the people of your great country, in line with the Chinese dream and ideology of socialism with Chinese characteristics. On our part, ZANU-PF is unwavering in advancing sustainable development which leaves no one behind. As such, the aspirations of our people for a better quality of life are the focus of all party and government efforts. Under the new leadership of the party's Central Committee and government, we have adopted a new development model and are endeavoring to ensure constant improvement in the quality and the impact of development policies, programs, and projects.
It was a great honor to have been invited to participate in the 100th anniversary of the CPC. I must say that the summit has been well organized with participants all around the world, and that shows the role of China now taking, I would say, a leading role on the international scene. Let me congratulate the CPC for the achievements throughout the 100 years where it has taken China into economic progress and development.
It seems to me that the President has insisted on the fact that it is necessary all the time to have the concern of the cultural anchoring. Socialism cannot be established elsewhere than on a national basis. A national base means experience, it means customs, it means a certain temperament. It is by having the intelligence of all this that you can obviously build on something solid. And it is what China has achieved, which is why today it is where it is.
I listened to the speech of President Xi Jinping, who said that the economy must be Chinese style and that development must also be Chinese style. I believe this is something that is very important because China, we can see its development going in a way that is really, I don't know how to qualify it. We used to say it's in the elevator. China does not take the stairs, but takes the elevator.
This has really informed the world that South Sudan exists and South Sudan needs to be listened to. We are very thankful for this great invitation. It shows strong solidarity and friendship between China and South Sudan, and we hope this will continue as it grows more and more in development, in society, getting to know each other, in areas of politics, in the political parties' relationship, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and the Communist Party of China will learn from each other, especially the Sudan People's Liberation Movement.
People are astonished how China managed to move from what it was. It was a member of one of the developing countries in the 70s and 60s and 70s. But it has just jumped up in a very short time to become a second economy in the world. This is very astonishing, and this is what people wanted to learn. Because everybody wants to move also quickly to get a lesson from China. And this is, I think, it is striking everybody. They want to know how China did this. And of course, to me, I believe it is the unity of the Chinese people behind the Communist Party in promoting peace in the country and working hard day and night so that they achieve a level of development.
I'm thrilled by the inspiring speech delivered by the Secretary General of the CPC, His Excellency Xi Jinping. I find particularly the keynote speech insightful and progressive, as it highlights the strides made in bringing about the great rejuvenation of the People's Republic of China and the Chinese people under the vision and leadership of the CPC. China has undoubtedly managed to realize in the first centenary goal of building a moderately and prosperous society in all aspects of human endeavor. The attainment of the first centenary goal has positioned China on a very solid and positive trajectory of pursuing the second centenary goal of transforming China into a great modern socialist country in all aspects. And I repeat, in all aspects. Undoubtedly, with the able leadership of the CPC, this goal is likely to be attained in record time.
Now, the United Nations Children's Fund is warning that 4.5 million children in South Sudan, that's 2 out of 3 children, are in desperate need of humanitarian support. South Sudan is celebrating the 10th anniversary of the country's independence this month, but UNICEF says hopes that independence would bring a new dawn for the country's children have faded. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports from Pibor in South Sudan.
Amotoli Ikorok is a 20-year-old mother of 2. Her husband is jobless, so the family depends on food aid. They only eat 1 meal a day. Amotoli's 2-year-old child is now malnourished and has other medical conditions. The child is now admitted to this health center run by aid agencies with support from UNICEF.
I was so worried. I thought my child would not recover, but when I brought him here, he was given treatment and now he's fine. I'm grateful to the people providing treatment here.
UNICEF says 8.3 million people in South Sudan need humanitarian support. That number is higher than the levels seen during the 2013 to 2018 civil war, when it was 7.5 million people. Relative peace is returning after the country's 2018 peace deal, but here in Pibor, home to 215,000 people, intercommunal conflict is rampant, displacing residents and pushing them to depend on humanitarian aid. Relentless rain in the past 2 years caused flooding in this area, washing away crops and lots of livestock, causing lack of food and creating hygiene problems. As a result, many children are now malnourished. This health center with just 10 beds is the only facility for treating children who are malnourished and have medical complications in this area. The child mortality rate in South Sudan is among the highest in the world, with 1 in 10 children not expected to reach their 5th birthday, and the situation is not getting better.
Initially, the beginning before rains were there, the flow was okay, but now with the issue of rains, patients become more, because ideally sometimes in a week 3 patients, 4 patients, but the last 2 weeks every day there should be 2 patients coming.
UNICEF says more than 300,000 children, the highest number ever in the country, are expected to suffer from the worst form of malnutrition and are at risk of dying if treatment is not provided.
UNICEF is appealing to the donor community not to cut its humanitarian budget for South Sudan and its children, because if you look at it comparatively, more than ever before, the children of this youngest country of the world really needs donors to support them so that they can enjoy their rights.
For women like Amotoli Ikorok, the struggle continues to get enough food for their families. For now, Amotoli's only guarantee of getting by depends on humanitarian aid. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Pibor, South Sudan.
Elsewhere, humanitarian agencies are warning that an alarming rise in school kidnappings is disrupting the education of hundreds of thousands of Nigerian children. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, estimates that there are over 13 million children out of school across the country, which is the highest number recorded globally. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa now reports.
At the age of 7, Yusuf Lado has already abandoned his dream of becoming a doctor and is training to be a welder. He had not yet learned to read or write when his school closed for fear of attacks by armed gangs.
In the daytime, bandits came and attacked our village, so we ran away from the school.
The armed groups have been abducting students across northwest Nigeria as they seek ransom payouts. The increase in school kidnappings has disrupted the education of hundreds of thousands of Nigerian children. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, estimates that around 1,125 schools are closed across northwest Nigeria.
The situation in education in Nigeria is probably at its biggest crisis point at the moment. There are in the region of 13.2 million children out of school in total, which is the highest number globally.
None of Yusuf's 9 siblings is in school. The family fled their village of Kaure last year after a series of attacks by criminal gangs. Yusuf's 19-year-old cousin was taken while he was on his way to work on a farm. The family paid the kidnappers 1 million naira, equivalent to $2,400, but they still killed him. The family now lives in a house provided by a local leader on the outskirts of Kaduna City, but there are no free schools in the area that Yusuf's father considers safe enough.
I will do my best to see that my children are educated, even if it is just 2 amongst them, because I am not educated and I don't want them to be like me. I will try and put them back in primary school.
The extremist group Boko Haram, whose name translates roughly as Western education is forbidden in the local Hausa language, shocked the world when it seized more than 200 girls from the town of Chibok in 2014. The armed gangs behind the kidnappings in the northwest have no clear ideological aims, but rights group Amnesty International says they have been successful in denying children an education. The Kaduna State Education Commissioner, Shehu Usman Muhammad, says he is working to keep schools open by reinforcing security at some and relocating others. But with economic opportunities particularly limited in the north, experts say the bandits appear keen to continue abducting people for monetary gains. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
To Haiti now, where the country has declared a state of emergency after President Jovenel Moïse was killed in an assassination attack. He was shot by a group of assailants early Wednesday. Haiti's interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph confirmed the news in a statement. He did not identify the assailants but said they were Spanish-speaking. The assassination has sparked fears of widespread turmoil. The Dominican Republic has closed its border with the country. Elsewhere, media reports say the death toll in a building collapse in the U.S. state of Florida has jumped to 46. They say 10 more bodies have been discovered in the rubble. Over 100 others are still missing. The condo tower partially collapsed about 2 weeks ago. On Sunday, officials demolished the remainder of the building ahead of the approaching tropical storm Elsa. It is still unclear why the 40-year-old building collapsed. A 2018 engineering report had pointed out structural deficiencies. You're watching Africa Live. Stay with us. We'll have plenty more after this short break.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's take you to East Africa now, where in Uganda, prison authorities are sounding the alarm over rising COVID-19 infections in crowded jails. Officials say they have recorded over 100 COVID-19 cases in prisons across the country in a period of 2 weeks. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga now reports.
Tadeo Amanyire is starting a new life after prison. He spent 7 months in jail, but he says life in prison is particularly challenging right now because of the pandemic.
The situation is not good in the wards where we sleep. It is congested. If you want to change your sleeping position, you have to seek permission from a warden.
Amanyire says without social distancing, infections are spreading fast.
After regaining his freedom, Amanyire says he can now practice social distance and also wear a mask, something that was a challenge while in detention.
Uganda's prison facilities are designed to accommodate 20,000 prisoners, but they are now holding up to 60,000 inmates. Prison authorities fear that the congestion in detention facilities could facilitate further spread of the virus.
In the last 2 weeks, we have had over 100 cases. And the reason is police continues to arrest. But now, this COVID has infiltrated the entire country, the countryside. So every time we find that almost every 10 people they pick about to have the COVID.
Figures from prison authorities show that they've so far registered 1,438 cases and 2 deaths. Prison authorities are now carrying out random testing of prisoners, and all visits have been suspended. And in order to decongest the detention facilities, the government is also exploring a quicker way of handling sentences.
Police should accordingly arrest and charge with hefty fines. We are not going to arrest you and put you in jail to eat our free food. No, you will be the one to pay.
Rights activists are also urging prison authorities to ensure strict adherence to the World Health Guidelines. It is hoped that these new measures could help decongest the prisons and also contain the spread of the virus. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Nearly 11,000 people in Nigeria have been infected with cholera since the start of this year alone. That's nearly 10 times higher than last year's 1,800 reported cases, adding pressure to the country's health sector that's already stretched thin trying to tackle the pandemic. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza tells us more from Abuja.
27-year-old Joy Robo manages to emerge from her shanty to take her medication for the day. For the past 2 weeks, Joy has been down with symptoms of cholera, including diarrhea, vomiting and restlessness.
I really don't know what caused this illness, whether it's our water source or it's the environment, but I've been treating myself in a pharmacy. Some of my neighbours have suffered worse. Some have taken up to 30 drips before they recovered.
Cholera is a bacterial disease that usually spreads in contaminated water or food and can lead to death if not properly treated. Nigeria's Center for Disease Control says nearly 300 people died from cholera between January and June. Outbreaks mostly occur in rural areas where there is a lack of sanitation, hygiene, and poor access to safe drinking water. Some non-governmental organizations are now helping to teach communities hand-washing techniques, how to keep their environment clean, and to report symptoms of cholera to the hospital in time.
Imagine building your house without having a toilet. That's the household's responsibility. Equally, dumping of refuse is the household that needs to put in place proper measures. So we have youths currently working in the field who are going from house to house and creating this awareness, especially around hand washing, ensuring that households, install hand washing facilities and clean up their toilets more often. That way, it's a behavioral issue, so it will take time before we start seeing results.
NGOs say the lockdown due to the pandemic last year has contributed to increased cholera infections reported this year.
The pandemic has actually affected the outbreak of cholera because of the open defecation practice more refuse are dumped in the open places. The water sources are not well protected. The water source, the container they use, most of them are using open bath, buckets, which is not ideal. So the germs still get into the water and contaminates the water that they consume. And that really leads to the cholera that they usually come down with.
Nigeria has had to deploy huge resources to try to combat the pandemic, which has left its healthcare system overstretched.
Due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the country's health sector, experts here are calling for more hygiene exercises and information campaigns on the prevention of cholera to complement the government's efforts in tackling the disease.
The NCDC has activated a National Cholera Emergency Operations Center in different parts of the country to help detect and treat cases of cholera. It's hoped that these steps will help prevent the further spread of the disease. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Some African diplomats have praised the poverty alleviation efforts in northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. They made the remarks at a lecture among ambassadors in Beijing. CGTN's Huang Yue reports.
Some African diplomats say China's counterterrorism efforts have led to a better life in Xinjiang, which have largely been condemned by Western countries as a violation of human rights. The remarks were made at the 9th Ambassador Lecture between the China-Africa Institute and the Xinjiang think tank of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. One diplomat says China has achieved significant progress in poverty eradication in Xinjiang, especially after 2017.
UNESCO condemns that education allows for upward socio-economic mobility for those in poverty by providing access to more skilled, higher-paying jobs. However, when it comes to China's programs in Xinjiang, which have been very, very successful, this fact is completely ignored. The Chinese central government embarked on deliberate education and empowerment education, which imparted skills to the Uyghur youths who were previously impoverished and vulnerable to radicalization.
Some African diplomats who visited Xinjiang in recent years say they've witnessed changes and developments in the region. One of them says eradicating poverty has been an important measure in the fight against terrorism and religious extremism.
What has happened in Xinjiang, I think it is a very successful way of combating extremism, because if people, the life of the people was improved and changed, they will not listen to the extremism, because the extremists, they tell the people that you are poor, so because the country, the government is not ready to help you in order to promote your life and so on. But when it happened, they were defeated. They were really defeated by having eradication of poverty.
Last November, Xinjiang announced it had bid farewell to absolute poverty, with the region's last 10 impoverished counties being removed from the list. After visiting Xinjiang, ambassadors and diplomats from various African countries say they've witnessed the peace and stability of the region, and they think the fight against the poverty has greatly contributed to this. Huang Yue, CGTN, Beijing.
A giant container ship that blocked the Suez Canal for nearly a week in March has finally been released by Egyptian authorities. Officials say the ship was freed after they reached a compensation deal with its owner and insurer. The ship had blocked one of the world's busiest trading routes when it got stuck and was impounded soon after. Adel Mahroui has the details.
After being held for 107 days, the ship that blocked the Suez Canal entirely for 6 days is finally free. Since Egypt refloated the ship successfully on March 29, authorities have been holding negotiations with the Japanese owner of the Ever Given. Suez Canal officials insisted on getting compensation for the blockage, as well as the successful rescue mission which saw one Egyptian rescuer die. The Suez Canal Authority also wanted a salvation bonus for achieving that without any damage to the ship and the 18,300 containers it's carrying.
The difficulty we faced is that we wanted to make a balance between two contradicting principles. We wanted to maintain our relations with our partners, yet at the same time preserve our rights. Thank God we managed to do both. I can't tell you the figure we agreed upon, because we agreed not to disclose publicly. We managed to maintain our relations with our partners and with the countries involved.
Egypt first asked for $916 million in compensation. It then lowered the figure to $550 million, which was rejected as well. The final figure that all sides agreed on is expected to be less. The Canal Authority's chairman, Osama Rabia, says the body will get all the pledged financial payments this month. The Japanese owner has also promised to provide an additional tugboat that is to be delivered before the year ends.
The Suez Canal succeeds and thrives and will continue to succeed and thrive because of the special partnership between the Suez Canal and the vessels that use it. It is a strong symbiotic relationship And it is vital that that partnership is maintained and strengthened wherever possible. I am very pleased to say that over the past few weeks and months, through common sense, goodwill, and hard work, we have been able to achieve just that.
2 tugboats escorted the Ever Given from the Great Bitter Lake heading north. The ship is set to undergo full-body inspections at Port Said, the Egyptian canal city on the Mediterranean. The mega container ship is one of the biggest in the world. The 400-meter skyscraper-long vessel wedged and got grounded in the Suez Canal on March 23. The Ever Given is finally free. It is expected to reach Europe in 2 weeks. As a precautionary measure, the ship will be sailing at a slower speed than usual until it makes its first stop of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. There, suppliers will be receiving their goods they've been waiting more than 3 months for. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, from the southern entrance of the Suez Canal, Egypt.
And Raman Young is back in studio to bring us all the latest in business. Rama?
That's right, Mahir. Here's what's coming up in business news. Nigeria's parliament approves a $2.4 billion supplementary budget to fund vaccines and extra defense services. And Zimbabwe Central Bank introduces into circulation its new highest denomination banknote.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start in West Africa. Nigerian legislators have approved a $2.39 billion supplementary budget that will aim to address rising insecurity in the country but also fund COVID-19 vaccines. Lawmakers in Africa's largest oil producer also approved the external borrowing of some $6.2 billion through the issuance of a Eurobond. Nigeria emerged from a second recession since 2016 in the fourth quarter of 2020, but its growth rate at the moment is still pretty fragile. The government expects a 2021 budget deficit of roughly $14 billion to be financed largely from a combination of foreign and domestic debt. It says it wants to moderate debt servicing costs by accessing relatively cheaper funds abroad, especially as global interest rates fall below 2020 levels while local rates start to rise. Zimbabwe Central Bank has introduced a new 50 Zimbabwe dollar note and further adds that it will release an estimated $1 million into the banking sector. The new note joins the 2, 5, 10 and 20 Zimbabwean dollar notes which are already in circulation. This note is the latest and, well, by denomination, the largest in a series introduced from February 2019 as the country reinstates the use of its local currency. The release of the new notes comes at a time when Zimbabwe has just revised its year-end inflation target to 25% from a previous figure of 10%. Let's head over to South Africa. Authorities there have made an important step in efforts to regulate cryptocurrencies, having just received a set of recommendations from a government-established working group. This comes as authorities there grapple with an increase in financial scams where millions of dollars are siphoned off into crypto space, and recovering them is a pretty dangerous task. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu.
Illicit activity leading to large sums of money involving cryptocurrencies disappearing in recent years have forced financial state institutions and regulatory bodies to reconsider their previous approach to leaving digital currencies unregulated.
I think that we are closer than many other marketplaces are. I think the Reserve Bank was very quick off the mark. But I think that's commiserate with much of South Africa's history, in that we do tend to be early adopters of regulation, for better or for worse. So some of the better things there is, of course, you have tighter capital controls and more control of your economy and more transparency and more efficacy in dealing with economic crises, for example.
A new working paper on regulating cryptocurrencies has been released and is expected to influence South Africa's next steps in dealing with digital currencies.
We agreed that banning crypto assets would not be appropriate given the propensity such action might have in driving activity underground. Then also, I think, as well reported in recent months in the South African press and even internationally. So I suppose in view of the various suspected fraud and or scam related events, particularly involving crypto assets that have made the news over the last few months, doing nothing is also not an option.
Authorities are currently looking for the founders of a Johannesburg-based crypto company after $3.6 billion of investors' money disappeared.
So that's quite a challenge that regulators have to get a balance between, making sure that you're giving enough space for young things to grow, but also not allowing things to move too fast. Our Reserve Bank is looking to start cracking down on the crypto space. I think that it's perhaps in this case maybe a little too late, but going in a bit too strong.
The Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group was established in 2016 with the objective to create a forum for regulators to gain deeper insights into FinTech innovation and safeguard customers' interests.
So each individual's kind of regulator or IFWG member, there is already the conceptual agreement and buy-in that they would take forward the recommendations and implement them as it pertains to their area of responsibility.
The recommendations focus on consumer protection and how to bring crypto assets within the domestic exchange control framework. The working group says there will be a multi-speed approach to implementation over the next 6 months. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Small-scale enterprises in Uganda are angling to benefit from a share of the $1 billion loan the country's gotten from the International Monetary Fund. Experts also hope that the loan will increase domestic revenue, at least help to increase domestic revenue, in the East African nation. Here's CGTN's Leon Senyange with this report.
Uganda's economy has been hit hard by the COVID-19 crisis, forcing huge dips in tourism, agriculture and trade. But confirmation that a 3-year financing package has been approved by the International Monetary Fund has brought optimism that the country could get back on its feet.
Because of the lockdown measures, government cannot afford to collect the domestic revenue that is collected in the past. In that sense, you need external support. And we are happy that Uganda is eligible for support because very many countries can't borrow.
Transport restrictions, quarantine and long lockdowns have suffocated small-scale businesses like Paul Kaziro's. He imports used items from Asia. Kaziro is holding on to hope that economic support may be offered to the business sector by the government.
You have to have a way of how coming down to us and see how they can help us as small traders, but who are fighting to see that we raise our stakes in the business that we are dealing with.
So far, about $1.2 billion has been borrowed by the Uganda government from various sources for COVID-19 interventions. According to the country's Ministry of Finance, the first disbursement of about $258 million from the IMF has already been received. But the impact of such support in dealing with economic and social strife is yet to be felt.
There have been challenges in how previous funds have been spent, but I would say that IMF has recognized this. That's why they have put the issue of governance in there. What IMF is interested in is for the Ugandan economy to go into meltdown. They want Uganda to maintain a certain level of macroeconomic stability.
Uganda continues to be squeezed by COVID-19. Last month, the country experienced its highest surge in cases, forcing a 42-day lockdown. That is already increasing the pressure on both the economy and livelihoods. Experts worry that there could be further detriments to recovery if the COVID-19 pandemic lasts longer, and that could lead to more severe social and economic problems that will require the government to rethink its recovery plans. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Out of the continent now, the Chinese electric vehicle maker Xpeng, which just wrapped up its $1.8 billion dual listing in the Hong Kong bourse, closed flat at 165 Hong Kong dollars a share on its first trading day. It's led by a former Alibaba executive, He Xiaopeng. The 7-year-old automaker is developing some smart car technologies, including a smart cabin and autonomous driving tech as well. The company says it plans to roll out a new product platform and new car models as well, targeting the global market in the next 2 years. Xpeng is currently making its cars in 2 factories in China, and it's building 2 new plants. Climate-related risks may be highly non-linear, and the effects on the financial system can be very uncertain. That, at least, is a warning from the Financial Stability Board, or the FSB. In a fresh report out on Wednesday, the global bodies argue that overseas, the global financial system is now suggesting that better data disclosures are needed to monitor and assess climate-related risks which threaten global financial stability. In order to standardize the data monitoring across jurisdictions, companies and sectors, the FSB is now suggesting that a global comparison and aggregation of financial firms' exposures be done. It also is calling for supporting forward-looking assessments that help capture the uncertainties and the potential tail risks that various market actors do face. Recent heat waves in the United States are taking their toll on the country's infrastructure and agriculture. The United States Department of Agriculture says nearly 180 million acres of crop-producing areas and over 15 million beef cattle farms are in a state of drought. Higher temperatures are also increasing the use of energy, and that puts some areas at risk of persistent rolling blackouts. The weather also does pose huge challenges on food security too. Global food prices at the moment are the highest levels in a decade. According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, prices went up for the 12th month in a row in the month of May, up nearly 40% year on year. In the meantime, Swiss Re Institute also warns that climate change could wipe out up to 18% of the world's GDP by 2050. All right, then I'll leave it there for the time being, but we'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll check in on that unprecedented legal drama in South Africa. The former president, Jacob Zuma, facing arrest tonight. It's unclear, though, if the South African police will execute the arrest warrant that hangs over his head ahead of a midnight deadline. Mr. Zuma's lawyers have, of course, approached the High Court to try and halt the order, with the judgment not due until 11:30 local time on Friday. We'll discuss that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Maria.
Rama, thank you. Well, stay with us here on Africa Live. Here's what's still to come. Belgium begins the long road to returning looted Congolese artworks.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, the Belgian government has finally said it'll begin the process of returning artifacts stolen from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The artwork is said to have been looted by Belgian explorers when the DRC was still under colonial rule. Belgian officials, however, say they will only return items that have been specifically requested by the DRC government. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
It is one of the treasures that the Democratic Republic of Congo will be recovering from Belgium soon. Standing tall against a wall in a museum in Taverne near Brussels, this is Nkissing Konde. It is said to have belonged to one of the Congolese kings of the Boma community that occupied the port town of the Congo River.
For too long, the Congolese people have been cut off from this inheritance, their spirituality, the work of their ancestors. These objects do not belong in any way to the Belgian people, and they must be given back and reconnected to their roots.
It all started in the 19th century under King Leopold of Belgium. During his time, scientists, explorers and soldiers are said to have stolen the artifacts. The spectacular arts of work are made of wood, ivory, with a number of them being masks, manuscripts and musical instruments.
I have no problem whatsoever to transfer the ownership to the Congolese, to whom it rightly belongs. It's a moral question.
The European country has been under pressure to return the looted objects back to the African country. Activists and intellectuals have been leading this battle.
Colonization in itself is violence, symbolic violence, physical violence. It's violence. Now we have to work out in what context the objects arrived here, and that's the work that needs to be done. It is true that there are objects where evidence shows that they were acquired through decapitation, unimagined violence. When that's directly demonstrated, there is no discussion. For the others, it is possible to study them minutely. It's not impossible. It can be done.
The Belgians, however, insist that the items will be returned back to the Democratic Republic of Congo only upon the request of the authorities there. They say officials have to ask for the specific artwork they want back. The Belgians also say the treasures number fewer than 5,000 pieces. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Right, and here's what's coming up in the sport. Kenya emerge overall winners of the second edition of the Africa Kabaddi Championships.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome to the sport. Now, Kenya has emerged overall winners of the second edition of the Africa Kabaddi Championships. The event, which was held in Tanzania's coastal city of Dar es Salaam, saw only 3 out of the 20 countries due to participate show up due to COVID-19 logistical issues. CGTN's Daniel Kijo now reports.
The Africa Kabaddi Championship saw Kenya become the overall winner, dominating Tanzania and Egypt in both the men's and women's divisions. The tournament organizers say they expected 20 teams, but only Tanzania, Kenya and Egypt made it to match day. Simon Kibura is Kenya's team captain and one of East Africa's most experienced Kabaddi players. He says he has seen the sport grow over the last few years.
I was the first person to play Kabaddi in Africa, and today we have an African Kabaddi Championship. This shows that in a very short period of time, this sport has grown drastically.
Kabaddi is a combative team game, played on either an indoor or outdoor rectangular court, with 7 players on the ground for each side. This is the second edition of the African Kabaddi Championships. The organizers say COVID-19 not only stopped some countries from participating, but also limited the fans who could come watch the matches.
We had to allow a few people in attendance at the venue, but other fans had to watch the matches live on TV.
The Tanzanian government says it uses tournaments like these as an opportunity to market the country. Officials are calling on young people and the private sector to support the game in the country.
Leo Tanzania tunaweza kupata nafasi ya kuandaa mashindano ya Afrika.
To us, hosting is a privilege. Up to now, we have 2 Tanzanians Kabaddi professional players who play in the top Indian league. So we see this as an opportunity. Not everyone can play football, not everyone can play basketball, and not everyone can run. So for those who want to do Kabaddi, we will support them.
Many believe Kabaddi originated in ancient India. Organizers and Kabaddi players alike believe the explosiveness of the sport they love makes it extremely television friendly. They want to keep televising and promoting Kabaddi matches. This, they hope, could educate the masses on the sport, something important for the development of African Kabaddi. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Crossing the border, the Kenyan national under-23 football team, the Emerging Stars, are currently in camp as they intensify preparations for the 2021 CECAFA Senior Championships. The team's head coach Stanley Okumbi says that they are working around the clock to make sure they select a strong squad ahead of the championship later this month. Speaking after guiding his full squad in their first training session in Nairobi, the Emerging Stars tactician is optimistic that the selected players will give the country the best results in the tournament. The team is set to leave for Ethiopia on the 14th of July, with the regional showdown set to kick off on the 17th of July.
Actually, it's tough because now it's under 23. Under 23 is almost a national team. Of course, it's senior team, almost senior team, because most of the players that we are having here, maybe after the tournament, they'll also be in the senior team. Maybe we'll be playing against the senior team of the other team. So it's going to be tough, but of course we are also preparing in a very tough way, and we are going to approach the tournament in a very serious way.
Further afield, Italy reached the Euro 2020 final after edging out Spain 4-2 in a shootout, following a compelling 1-1 draw after extra time on Tuesday night. Roberto Mancini's side took the lead on the hour through a sensational curler from Federico Chiesa to complete a sweeping counter-attack. Alvaro Morata then levelled for Spain with 10 minutes left, calmly slotting into the bottom corner after bursting forward and exchanging a 1-2 pass with Dani Olmo. Spain looked more likely to find a winner in the remaining minutes and in extra time could not manage a second shootout victory after prevailing against Switzerland in the quarter-finals.
First and foremost, we are delighted to have been able to provide this wonderful evening of entertainment to the Italian people, and now we still have one game to go, and we want to do exactly that, if possible. We knew that it was going to be a tough game because in terms of ball possession, Spain are the best around. They caused us problems. However, we wanted to make it into the final and we kept trying right until the end. And as ever, penalties are a lottery. But I really want to take my hats off to Spain. They are a wonderful team.
It's not a sad night for me, not at all. Of course, there is a bit of disappointment, but that's elite football. You have to be able to win and lose. We were very pleased to win the penalty shootout in the quarterfinals, but we can't get too upset now. We have to just congratulate our opponents.
Meanwhile, England will play Denmark in the other semi-final in just over an hour's time. The Three Lions thrashed Ukraine 4-0 to make the final 4, while Denmark scraped past the Czech Republic 2-1 in the quarters, and Italy will await the victors in the showpiece event on the 11th of July. England coach Gareth Southgate said Denmark's changing formations during a game will be a challenge, but believes England have intelligent players who can adapt to different systems. His counterpart Kasper Hjulmand says his team won't be heading to Wembley feeling like underdogs.
We are going into this match with huge enthusiasm and faith, and there is only one thing that is certain. We are going to go on that pitch and give everything that we have. This game is going to be the biggest shot for us, and we believe it will be hard for England to beat us. We believe we can win, and that is what we will seek.
We always have to try to pick the right approach for the opponent. Denmark have been changing during matches, so they've got real fluidity with their selection, and we'll have to be aware of that during the game. I think the players are aware of that, and we've got players that make good decisions on the field now. They've got experience of coming up against different systems. They know how to counter those systems, and they know where to find the spaces.
And finally, Com Damien Awumu, who's the Minister Counselor at the Cameroon Mission to the United Nations, has hit out at World Athletics during a special debate on sports and human rights at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. He claims that the World Athletics governing body is discriminating against women with intersex variations by requiring them to reduce high natural testosterone levels to participate in the female category. Namibian athletes Christine Mboma and Beatrice Masilingi are the latest victims of the rule, being withdrawn last week from the 400 meters women's event at the Olympic Games after tests revealed their testosterone levels were too high. And that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Do remember you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Mahe Mutwa. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But let's start with a quick update on the markets. The top 14 in South Africa did close about 1.6% higher today, reversing course essentially after Tuesday's decline in that particular session of around 0.5%. Nasdaq is nearly 2% higher. Platinum stocks, however, did have the highest percentage gains on the day. Amplats, it's Anglo-American Platinum, and Impala Platinum closed 5% and 3.2% higher, respectively. Nigeria's oil share 4.4% lower on a year-to-date basis, but it's gone up by 1.5% so far in July. The bigger question, though, is will it be able to hold on to those gains? Futures trading is coming to that bourse at some undetermined point in the future. 7 counters, including Access, GT and Zenith Bank, have been approved for that futures trading by the SEC in Nigeria. Here's what's coming up tonight. South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma faces imminent arrest. Kenya set to host the Africa Green Revolution Forum. And the OECD says the world's unemployment level will remain relatively high until at least 2023. Our starting point tonight is in South Africa. The country's police over there are essentially obligated to arrest the former president Jacob Zuma in the absence of further instructions from the Constitutional Court. This comes after the country's top court sentenced the former head of state to 15 months in jail after he defied its order to testify before a commission of inquiry that's probing large-scale graft in the country. The court also ordered Mr. Zuma to surrender to the authorities by the 4th of July or face arrest within 3 days of that deadline. The police minister, Bekicele, has sought clarity from the court about that particular arrest order after Mr. Zuma applied to a lower court to have it suspended. Now, the judgment on the application to stay the arrest is expected to be handed down on the 9th of July. All right, then let's bring you up to speed with the latest developments on this particular story. Angela Coppola joins us now live from Johannesburg with more data on this developing legal drama. Angela, do we know where the former president is at the moment?
Well, we understand that Zuma may well still be at Nkandla. A small group of supporters has gathered at the homestead, we know that for sure. We're also hearing reports that South African police service officers tried to enter the homestead earlier today, and they were blocked by people wearing military uniforms. We assume that's the Military Veterans Association. We do understand that the South African Police Services Minister and a large police contingent may be heading to Nkandla as we speak. And just a short while ago, Zuma, in fact, his lawyer, that's Dalim Mpofu, had written to the acting Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, to ask for a stay on that arrest warrant that was issued by the Constitutional Court last week. We haven't seen any response yet, so we're going to wait for that. As you say, Raman, this is a developing story.
Indeed. It's also a rather curious story because the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, it reserved judgment in the president's application to have his arrest order put on hold. Why?
Well, simply put, the judge reserved that judgment or that order because he wasn't ready to make or appear to rule in haste. He has to apply his mind, he said, to what is a fairly weighty matter. It seems fairly straightforward, but it's about finding case law to justify whichever decision he makes on Friday. It's all a question of jurisdiction, and that's according to Dalim Mpofu, Zuma's lawyer. And then listening to proceedings yesterday, all three parties, that's Zondo, the Helen Suzman Foundation, and of course Zuma's lawyers, agreed that the merits of the Concord case wouldn't be discussed in the High Court in Maritzburg, but that they'd focus on the jurisdiction of the matter. So that's why it's been held over until Friday, Roman.
So by government estimates, roughly $35 billion was stolen through various means in the 9 years Mr. Zuma was in power. He's repeatedly said he's innocent, he's got clean hands. So given that, why is he so obstinately refusing to testify before a commission that he himself set up?
Well, Roman, that's a $35 billion question, isn't it? I mean, bottom line here is that Zuma watchers are suggesting that perhaps Zuma may have realized that he wouldn't be able to control or manage the narrative or the proceedings. He has met his match, some say, in Raymond Zondo, who comes across as this kind, gentle uncle figure almost, but he's sharp as a tack and goes for the jugular whenever he gets the opportunity to. We're also told that Zondo critics have suggested that Zondo may have bent over backwards to accommodate Zuma, short of giving him the actual questions the Commission then planned to ask him, and that was a couple of months ago. Added to which, there are around 30 witnesses that we know of that have implicated the ex-president, and Zuma would have to answer some of those questions, and they're very awkward questions. And if he refused to answer them, well, that speaks a whole different narrative on its own, doesn't it, Raman?
Indeed, and all those questions certainly will need some answers. But where does the ANC stand on this issue? Is it pretty firm as a matter of policy that the former president must obey the courts, or is a faction that supports him openly opposed to that?
Well, Raman, it's all about those pesky factions, isn't it? Just yesterday, during a media briefing after that special National Executive Committee meeting or council meeting that was held to discuss the reaction to Zuma, the acting SG Secretary General Jessie Duarte said that the ANC, and these are her words, loves Jacob Zuma. Earlier she said that the ANC didn't support Zuma's position on not attending the Zondo Commission and also not handing himself over based on the Concord ruling and judgment to the South African Police Services Minister. Is the ANC's position firm? This is politics, so it's my submission that nothing's firm. Raman?
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being and try and figure out exactly where Mr. Jacob Zuma will be by the stroke of midnight tonight. Angela Coppola there live in Johannesburg. Now, on to Africa's largest economy. Nigeria's announced plans to start building a $1.2 billion rail line that's linking the northern cities of Kano and Kaduna. The country's transport minister, Rotimi Amaechi, said that construction will start this month. As CGTN's Deji Badmus now reports, Africa's largest economy is embarking on a significant rail construction boom to try and link the main towns in the 36 states with the nation's capital, Abuja.
This is the new addition to Nigeria's ambitious railway project, the Lagos-Ibadan 156-kilometer standard gauge railway. It's a segment of the 2,733 kilometers Lagos-Kano railway project, which will connect Nigeria's commercial capital with other parts of the country. The Kano-Kaduna railway, which is now scheduled for construction, providing both concessionary loans and the technical expertise to execute the projects. Chinese engineering firms are also the ones handling the Lagos-Kano rail project.
They have been cooperating, they are playing their role, and the arrangement is government to government. The beauty of it is that our government is also trying by not waiting and providing their counterpart funding. The money we are getting from China, it's not that it's being given to Nigerian government. They pay for the work done by the contractor. When we certify or the consultants say they have done this, we also look at it that they have done it. Then the Exim Bank.
The dollar on the 6th of July. Now, the currency of the West African oil, gold, gas and cocoa producers weakened by about 0.6% so far in the year, compared to the 3.4% fall in the Naira, a currency that's also tightly controlled by Nigeria's central bank. This is the weakest that the cedi has been on record. It's depreciated by just under 50% in the last 5 years. After years of strong GDP growth rates, Ghana's growth plunged to just 0.4% in 2020, due of course to the economic devastation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Fitch is expecting Ghana to have roughly $7.6 billion in FX reserves by the end of the year. That's equivalent to less than 3 months of import cover, and it's also a lot lower than other peer economies in sub-Saharan Africa with a similar rating. All right, then. So what exactly is explaining the weakness we're seeing now in the cedi? Let's explore that with economist Emmanuel Amoah-Dakwa, who's joining us live, of course, from Accra in Ghana. Thank you for your time this evening. So on a year-to-date basis, the cedi is only slightly weaker compared to where it started the year. But what's driving this persistent weakness that we're seeing to get it to 5.91 to the dollar? Emmanuel, if you can hear me, on a year-to-date basis, the cedi is only slightly weaker compared to where it started the year. But what exactly is driving this trend, this weakness that we're seeing now to get the cedi down to 5.9?
Plain to hear you.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Let's move on to Egypt. The country's central bank has announced that revenues from tourism in the first 9 months of the 2020-2021 fiscal year fell by over 67% to just $3.1 billion. Now, remember, tourism is a main source of hard currency for the North African nation, and it lost over $7 billion due to the outbreak of the pandemic last year. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim reporting on the measures the government is taking there to try and revive its vital tourism sector.
The data from the Apex Bank reflects the dire situation of the tourism industry, which has been battered by the coronavirus pandemic. In a bid to keep the tourism sector afloat, Egypt's central bank has extended its multi-billion-dollar emergency fund to the vital economic sector.
There are two initiatives. The first is funding tourism establishments to be able to pay salaries and avoid firing any employees. This initiative is led by the central bank and the president himself. The second initiative is to help hotels, companies, cruises and all tourism establishments to finance the maintenance of their facilities during the slowdown, to be able to continue operations and receive visitors when tourism recovers. This support is funded by offering loans at just 8% interest rates.
But it's not all doom and gloom for the industry. The last few months have seen a relative improvement in inbound tourism. Government figures show 3.5 million tourists visited Egypt in the first 6 months of 2021. It's the same amount of tourists that visited in the whole of the pandemic hit 2020. And hotel occupancy rates doubled to 45% in the first half of 2021, from an average 23% the year before. This is owed to the government's successful strategy to tap new markets in Eastern Europe that have no travel restrictions. Officials have also fully vaccinated workers in the main tourism resort cities.
What we've been doing in the past few months is to ensure that the health and safety and regulations that we are following in the hotel establishments ensures the safety and the health and safety of the travelers. So once this becomes known to the travelers, they would feel that they are trusting the destination, and that's why we've been receiving big numbers of tourists during the past months.
Analysts believe the third quarter could see a breakthrough for the tourism and travel industry.
In October, November and December, there will be a lot of movement in tourism from our main markets, which is the European Union, Russia and Ukraine. We expect higher numbers next winter because of the gradual overall improvement globally. The vaccines roll out worldwide, vaccinations in Egypt and the considerable drop in COVID cases in Egypt. What makes Egypt attractive in winter is that resort cities have warm weather, suitable to enjoy beaches, cultural tourism and everything related to tourism.
The government is forecasting 2021 revenue to exceed $6 billion. That's nearly double 2020, but still half the pre-pandemic level. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
All right, then let's start some corporate headlines in Rwanda. 8 Kenyans and a Ugandan arrested in Rwanda for hacking into Equity Bank have been handed 8-year jail terms and fined more than $55,000. The 9 are part of a 12-man gang arrested back in 2019 by the Rwandan Investigation Bureau, which included 3 Rwandese nationals. Now, the members of this organized group were arrested while trying to hack into Equity Bank accounts and directing the cash to Rwandan nationals to draw out the funds through easy banking, the mobile service and ATMs. Kenya's Kipeto Energy has finalized the full connection of its wind power plant to the national grid. That's expected to set the stage for a lot more cheaper power and the reduction of costly thermal power plants being on the grid too. Kipeto will now be supplying at least 100 megawatts of generation capacity to Kenya Power from its 60 wind turbines that are now connected to the national grid. Each one is producing around 1.7 megawatts of clean renewable energy. The Swedish telecom firm Ericsson is forecasting that 5G mobile subscriptions will hit at least 70 million across sub-Saharan Africa by 2026. That's according to the latest Ericsson Mobility Report for June 2021. The firm's Vice President Todd Ashton says that sub-Saharan Africa will experience sustained growth in mobile broadband driven by youthful population, affordable smartphone devices and improved coverage as well. In fact, that report is forecasting that by 2025 online activities will increase, leading to increased economic growth and more acceleration in Africa's digital inclusion drive. And speaking of electronics, Samsung Electronics says it expects its quarterly earnings to go up by over 50% amidst a global chip shortage. The smartphone manufacturer is also forecasting an operating profit of $11 billion for the 3 months ending in June. It also adds that strong demand for memory chips has offset weaker sales of devices due to a shortage of components. That's a run through your company headlines. We're about 15 minutes into the hour. Time for a break. Here's what's coming up next. Kenya is set to host the Africa Green Revolution Forum. We'll look at the food agenda. And pandemic restrictions are taking a bitter toll on Ugandan traders. Their stories are coming up next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business. Only on CGTN. Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Let's revisit an earlier story in the bulletin. The focus on the Ghanaian cedi. It did hit a record low, 5.91 to the American dollar in trading on the 6th of July, roughly around the same level in today's trading session. It's essentially weaker by about 0.6% so far this year, which is pretty good relative to other currencies across the continent. You think of the Zambian kwacha or the Nigerian naira, which is down by about 3.4%. But what exactly is it that's driving this weakness in the cedi? Let's explore that with economist Emmanuel Amoah-Dakwa. He's joining us again from Accra in Ghana. Emmanuel, thank you for your time this evening. So on a year-to-date basis, as I mentioned there, the cedi is only slightly weaker compared to where it started the year. But what's driving that general weakness we're seeing in Ghana's currency?
Thank you very much for having me. On top of my mind, I would say two critical issues are driving the marginal depreciation of the Ghana cedi as against the other trading major currencies. The first reason will be the external debt component that must be amortized by government. And so government is demanding a lot of foreign exchange to amortize the external component of our debt. Second reason will be the non-residential investors who are investing in Ghana, and their investments are due and they are repatriating their profits. So these are two reasons that are causing the marginal depreciation of the Ghana cedi as we speak.
So the cedi depreciated by 4% last year, 14% in 2019. But given its performance so far this year, should the central bank and should the finance ministry be critically concerned, or is this something they can sort of manage throughout 2021?
It's not a dire situation as I speak to you now, because in the second half of this year, there are two other events that is going to help show up the Ghana cedi as against the major trading currencies. And the first one will be the Cocoa Board syndicated loan, which in October will be issued. Cocoa Board will be looking forward to raising between $1.3 and $1.5 billion, which is expected to show up the stability of the Ghana cedi as against the major trading currency. And then the second reason will be the regulatory mechanisms put in by the Bank of Ghana to make sure that the Ghana cedi is performing well as against the major trading currency. So it's not a dire situation. I believe the central bank has a mandate to maintain price stability and also to foster stability in the exchange rate. And these are things that will help, maintain the Ghana cedi.
All right. So Ghana, of course, has also been working to try and restructure these take-or-pay contracts that we hear a lot about with power producers. Do we know where these negotiations are right now, and why is it taking so long to restructure them?
I must state that international negotiations or international contracts are complex, and then their negotiation or renegotiation, therefore, can be a daunting task. I have been speaking to sources that are close to the negotiation table. As I speak to you now, Senate Power and then other company have agreed on changing the fuel source that is going to be used. Initially, in the agreement, they were going to use light crude, but they have agreed to use natural gas. And it is projected that it's going to save the government about $3 billion. And so that is the first thing. Now, the second reason is about the kind of contract we have signed. Most of these contracts were take-or-pay agreements. And take-or-pay agreement, the renegotiation, therefore, might be almost impossible, because once you terminate such a contract, it will inure to judgment debt and it will inure to lawsuit as well. As I speak to you now, the government is going to incur about 170 million Ghana cedi in judgment debt because of termination of a contract by GPCC. So government must tread cautiously in renegotiating or terminating such contracts. So that is why it's taking long for renegotiation of such contract to be done. Again, it's about the duration of the contract. So government is in renegotiation in talks with these companies to change the duration of their contract. And these are some of the things that are accounting to the delay in the renegotiation process as I speak to you now.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Emmanuel Amwadakwa, thank you very much for joining us from Accra in Ghana. Now, on to East Africa. It's been roughly 2 weeks since the Ugandan president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, imposed a strict nationwide lockdown. The movement of private public transport vehicles has been severely restricted, and that in turn has affected the livelihoods of millions. In Kampala's Nakasero market, fresh food vendors say they're facing very difficult times as their earnings decline and the working conditions and environment worsen. Here's Wanja Mungai with this report.
Since the Ugandan government imposed a nationwide lockdown of 42 days to combat the spread of COVID-19, life for many has changed significantly. The once vibrant Nakasero market in down Kampala has seen activities reduce. Vendors have been forced to adapt to the new health regulations. Some, like Joswi Navunga, cannot make it back home given the curfews and movement restrictions. They've been forced to shelter at the market at night.
I'm a single mother. I have kids at home. The elder one is 14, so I left them there alone. But normally I go there like on a weekend. So I feel the pain of leaving them at home alone. So I don't have anything to do apart from to stay here. At least I can look for something they can eat and not to take like the COVID whatever to them.
She is among the 1,000 traders at Nakasero Market who have had to bear with the tough conditions. Fresh food market vendors are among essential workers allowed to operate during the lockdown. But even with the exemption, they say things are bad. With movement of private and public vehicles also banned, business has been badly hit.
Our vendors are really in a bad situation because their profits have reduced. When their profits are reduced, that means they don't have any capital. And when they don't have capital, that means they will get the products from the farm suppliers at credit. This will affect the farm suppliers in the village. They will not dig anymore because they are not getting any monies.
The Ugandan government has been trying to assist citizens during this pandemic. It has been supplying relief food, money, and addressing people's basic needs. The vendors have been lucky to get mosquito nets, but they say
because of the poor sleeping materials.
The latest lockdown has helped reduce daily COVID-19 infections in the country from an average of 1,500 to just 500 cases. Now, Ugandans are hoping they will get a chance to resume their normal lives in the near future. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Increasing urbanization is putting a strain on space in Zimbabwean cities. It's limiting how much urban dwellers can actually grow food for themselves. But in recent years, hydroponics, which basically involves growing plants in nutrient solutions, not using soil at all, has emerged as a way in which urbanites can produce food in their backyards for domestic consumption and even on a commercially viable basis. CGTN's Farai Makutuya has that story.
Keith Chipudla began hydroponics farming in his parents' backyard 3 years ago. He's now setting up a second farm in another Harare suburb. Proximity to his clients allowed him to scale up quickly.
For example, someone makes an order, it will not take the whole